Welcome to Your Epic Pursuit. I'm Mike Mooney, and this is a space where we dive into inspiring and real conversations with people to explore their journeys of leadership and performance. And our conversation is going to flow through, as it typically does, the epic lens of excellence, presence, intentionality, and curiosity. So you're going to hear little hints and points of that woven through the conversation that we have today. And the goal is really, really quite simple. We want to empower you with use now and actionable tools and resources and ideas that can accelerate your own pursuit, whether that's in business or your life or in general. Now, listen, y'all, this is going to be a different type of episode. Typically, I'll have a one-on-one conversation with a leader and talk about their journey, their experiences, and their insights. But today, I want to take a little bit of a little pivot on that, because something that I've really been fascinated with over the last several months is the sort of the evolution of leadership development. This idea that, what's gotten leaders to where they are today, certain practices, standards, ideas, is continuously being sharpened or refined, and different ideas are coming out. I have two gentlemen joining us today that are going to unpack one of their, I want to say maybe like little magic ingredients, secret weapons for leadership development. And I think this is going to be a great conversation, y'all. So we have with us joining today, we have Shane Yount, who is the chairman and founder of Competitive Solutions Incorporated, an international consulting and software firm focused on developing leadership systems for high-performance organizations. He founded the firm in 1991 and has spent his career working with thousands of leaders in hundreds of different organizations, all with the focus of building high-functioning teams that are going to sustain increased engagement, accountability, and execution. Shane's a sought-after speaker, thought leader, and executive coach. He's published 4 business novels and continues to travel the world, working with leaders in their own pursuit of how to leave lasting and authentic leadership legacies. Shane, great to have you with us. We
Thanks,
also
Mike.
have
Good being here.
Absolutely. We also have Rob Kornblum with us, who is the CEO of Competitive Solutions, and he also has a passion for high performance in people and businesses. Yes, birds of a feather, very surprising, right? But here he is, like minds. And he spent his career as an operator and investor in high growth companies in a number of industries, including supply chain management, human capital, CRM, and benefits. He's also an accomplished author and speaker, has a TED Talk as well about how to develop and sustain culture in growing organizations. Gentlemen, thank you so much for carving out time to join us today on Your Epic Pursuit, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks, Mike.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Shane, why don't we jump in and kind of like ground ourselves for a second in the business and perhaps in CSI. You founded the business over 35 years ago. It's been an interesting year for you, right? Besides the market growth that you've had within the business, you also sold the firm, right? So I can't imagine that was a decision that A, you took lightly, or B, was something that you have just sort of stepped away from and said, okay, thanks so much. Take care. Good luck, Rob. And we'll check in at the holiday party.
Right, right.
Tell us a little bit about that process, or, how you approach this.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, and it's great to be here with you today. It's like many entrepreneurs, right? That's not an easy decision, but I actually began to take some advice that I've been giving leaders for the last 35 years, and that's to look in a mirror and ask yourself some interesting questions, right? And for me personally, right, it's been an amazing journey, right? From 1991, where we were, working in a rental house, to where we are today with offices, in Boston and Raleigh and Atlanta and Jacksonville, Florida. I mean, it's been an amazing ride. But as the last year and a half or so, it's really gotten to a point where I began to really look at the work I was doing and say, what do I love and what do I not love as much anymore, right? And through really the intentionality, and that's why I love your podcast and your content, right? Because taking that time to really be intentional and look in the mirror and ask yourself those questions, right, really pointed me to a direction that got us to where we are today, right? And about a year and a half ago, I really began to ask those questions like, what do I love to do? What do I
Yeah.
not love as much? And I kind of felt like, hey, we've built something that was durable and authentic and lasting growing, and I felt like we were at a place as an organization where we were looking for really some of the best years we've had in the history of the company, that now might be the time to begin to entertain a conversation around what that second summit for competitive solutions could look like, right? And so through that kind of whole process, I talked to a ton of different people, and often I walked away from that saying, it's not the person, it's not the firm, it's not the PE group, it's not the VC group. And then last year I met Rob, right? And very frankly, his values aligned with my values, his background aligned with my background, and that started a process that took us to May of this year, where Rob bought the firm, and it's been a fantastic process so far.
Yeah, what I love about that, Shane, is even when you've been running a successful firm for decades, it's this idea of we should, as leaders, be always looking at what's that next iteration going to be? What could it be? And quite honestly, am I the one to help get it there? And I can still play a role. Where could that be? And then finding the right resource or connections. Having the courage to do that. I don't think it's always easy to do, because we can often, as leaders, unintentionally, especially over time, wrap our identities around like we are the organization instead of we are really stewards of that organization.
No, you're right on, Mike. I
Yeah.
mean, and I think what inspired me to start the firm was that work, right? I mean, like just in the last 2 weeks, like I was speaking to a group of plant managers at Kimberly Clark. This week, I was in at 5 a.m. working with a frontline leader in this huge sewing room where they're sewing all these things. I mean, I love that, right? And I found myself like this gravitational pull, being pulled back to the things I love, right? And recognizing to really keep our company on the trajectory of growth, right? And the amazing team we have, maybe I'm better suited to work back in what I love and what inspired me to start this firm in 1991, and find a partner that really can operate in that strategic capacity, right? To really help us. And I love that metaphor, second summit, right? To really help us get to that second summit, and really fill spots that I couldn't, right? And that's what's been so great about Rob's contribution. I mean, just a shout out. I mean, 2025 will be our record revenue year, right? And I attribute that a lot to what Rob has brought to the organization to kind of help us get to that second summit.
So good. So good. And congratulations on that. Absolutely, Shane, for what you've built from the beginning to where you are today. And Rob, man, what an opportunity for you, right? I mean, you've been an investor. You love growth, high performance. It seems, at least at first on the outlook, like this would be a great organization, legacy organization, longstanding clients, great performance at the bottom line, as well as a loyal and hands-on team. You know, I'm curious, like what were some of the indicators or things that you were looking at that attracted you to this opportunity? Or maybe I've already listed them for you. I don't know, but I'm just curious, like what was the draw, the attraction from your perspective in this?
I think you definitely listed out a number of them, Mike. In that I was looking for an organization that had longstanding, customer relationships, and longstanding employee relationships. I think that sustainability, piece really does matter. Warren Buffett has a phrase that he calls enduringly profitable companies, and CSI, certainly is that. um, the not only the way that the team I think operates internally, but the way that they operate externally mirror each other. There's an incredible amount of care between team members, an incredible amount of care between our team and our clients. We really do look to partner with clients. I know that sounds like every consultancy maybe says that, but we've been working with the U.S. Army for since the 90s. We've been working with Alcon for over 10 years. Some of our larger clients, Brazeway, since the 90s. So you don't you don't have relationships like that last that long, if you're not doing something right.
That's right.
Um, so those were, I think, a big part of it. I also wanted a an organization where there was a natural fit for me to come in and put my skills to work.
Hmm.
Where I tend to think from a sales and marketing perspective, how can we grow this business?
Yeah.
From an analytics perspective,
Yeah.
what are the products that make the most sense for us to emphasize? And and where the team is, continues to be engaged. I didn't want an opportunity where I would come in and, as you said, they hand you the keys and say good luck. So the fact that Shane and the rest of our team, Seth, Paul, are still all heavily involved, was a big part for me.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And you can feel that. I mean, that it's palpable when you're in meetings and conversations, I'd imagine, and
Absolutely.
transitions like this, so you're saying like just as client growth, sustainability, et cetera, those aren't happenstance. It's very intentional over time. This transition, I'm sure, Robin, what you're trying to do has got to have some intentionality to it as well, right? In terms of these early steps of ensuring that things go smoothly with the clients, um, with the internal team as well. And I'm curious, like for leaders who are listening who may be going through this or thinking of going through this or in the midst of transition. It doesn't have to be within a purchase of an organization. It can be within departments, within a leader taking on a new team or a legacy team in their own world. What are some of the things that you, as a new owner, as a leader in the organization, were like, I got to make sure my first steps are good ones because they're going to set a tone. Were there a couple of things that you were focused on in the beginning that might be helpful to other leaders that are maybe looking at a similar path right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first is just understanding what you don't know. And as a new leader in an organization, quite frankly, you don't know much. So I spent a lot of time over the course of the summer and fall getting out to meet clients, both over Zoom and Teams, but also importantly face to face. And I've met almost all, I think, of our important clients face to face, and all of them over digital means. Similarly with our team members who do have a tendency to travel. And so it's not like I can just go to one office and say, all right, here, I want to sit down and do a one-on-one, right? So some of those have taken place on the road at, over dinners or breakfasts or, client meetings or that kind of thing. Really making sure I understand what makes everyone tick.
Yeah.
And then, adding in understanding this is a legacy organization. What are the areas that can move the needle? What are the areas where we can make improvements, over time, and will improve both, business performance and also everyone's lives.
Hmm.
And being really, I think you use the word intentional about trying to balance growth, which is an absolute objective, with making sure that we don't just make change for change sake. I jokingly said that my number one mission was not to screw things up in the first few months.
Well, it's yeah,
Shane and
admirable.
team built a great organization. I just needed to make sure that I understood exactly, why it was great, and and then add to that instead of just kind of shaking the snow globe.
I love that shaking the snow globe because how often do leaders want to step in and shake that up, put their fingerprint on things when they haven't even taken the time to truly understand what is the culture, what is the behavior, what are the drivers that have gotten this team to where they are today. I had a leader one time who said, "Look, you step into a new role, don't look to be making any substantive changes for at least 6 to 8 months, before you're making and building relationships." You know, Shane, I saw you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I was just gonna say so much, and we hear this word a lot, and Mike, you talk about it, is curiosity, right? And I think sometimes people say, "Well, how does that manifest in the workplace?" Well, I can tell you how it's manifested in the last couple of months, and that's in that Rob has taken every opportunity to demonstrate curiosity of why do we do this, right? How do we do this? Where does this come from, right? And I think that demonstrative curiosity
Mhm.
to the team
Mm.
has given them a level of security and confidence and comfortability expressing both themselves, expressing why we do the things we do, but also then being aware that maybe we could do those things better, right? Which
Yeah.
I think that's the power of curiosity done well,
Mhm.
is that discovery manifest and getting people to say, hey, maybe that isn't the way it could be or should be. This is how let's build it together, right?
Right. No, I love that because there's a respect of, again, what got people in the team to where they are. It's not just like walking in, looking in the room and, chuck this, we'll chuck that, out with this or that. And I think we've all been, to some extent, I'm sure you can think back in your careers when a leader's come in and done just that. And it's like, whoa, I mean, their credibility, the trust goes out the window. Now, thinking about leadership and how that role has been evolving, the development of leaders over the decades. And Shane, I know you've seen this so much firsthand, as well as Rob. You know, leaders had, in terms of trying to build sustainable and scalable businesses, would often just lean into their own grit. They would lean into maybe just how smart they are or where they're naturally gifted in or what have you. But EQ and IQ just isn't enough today. And I'm asking you a bit of a leading question because I know that your latest book that you've come out introduces this idea of PQ to leadership development and why this is sort of that vital power ingredient, this fuel for leaders to build sustainable and scalable teams. So could you just unpack what PQ is, why today, why does that matter maybe even more than EQ and IQ? I don't know. Maybe it's not equaled out, but we'd love for you to just unpack that for the audience so they can kind of get their heads wrapped around it.
Yeah,
I'm
I'll
gonna let
jump in.
Shane go first, and then I'll follow up. I've got some context around this that I think is important.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that's
That's great.
awesome. Mike, you mentioned like grit, right? And let's kind of even just unpack what you just said, right? So many organizations, we love this entrepreneurial spirit, right? And that's awesome, right? That we get smart people who have great ideas, who just through their grit and determination and just sheer brute force and willpower make things happen, right? And we've seen that, right? We've seen that in private industry, we've seen that in family-owned businesses, we've seen that across the board the last 35 years. But as you begin to unpack really two themes, right? Sustainability and scalability, often there's some vulnerability in that way of work, right? I often say we hire for IQ and we train for EQ, right? And most organizations say, look, if we do that well, we should be good. What Rob and I have seen, and certainly Competitive Solutions has seen, is yes, hiring smart people. We all want to work with smart people, right? Training people on the proverbial soft skills, which I would bucket a lot of EQ in that, is the right thing to do, right? Um, but we've found over the years that often you can have a really smart leader who demonstrates EQ and everything's great as long as they're in that role. But when that leader moves up, moves on, or moves out, what often happens? And what we see is often the performance of the team atrophies, right? And
Mm,
that really led us down a
yeah.
path of a lot of research and a lot of, trying to unpack why is that? Why do some leaders, when they leave, it's like they were never there, and others leaders, when they leave, the team doesn't miss a beat. And we've discovered that and we've branded that as PQ or process intelligence, right?
So process intelligence is the PQ in that
It
equation.
is.
Okay.
And the way we see PQ, Mike, is look, we still want people to hire smart people. We still want you to train people on EQ. We believe those are incredibly key attributes of high functioning leaders. But we also now are introducing this third element that we're calling PQ or process intelligence, which is how do you teach leaders how to build systems, right? Systems that transcend your personality, right? Systems that transcend your physical proximity or your powers of persuasion, right? Often those are things that are outputs of dominant IQ, EQ leaders, right? But they don't lend themselves to sustainability and scalability because the bottleneck is the person, right? And
Yeah.
and when that person's there, things happen. When that person moves up, moves on, moves out, do we have the same level of confidence that those systems are going to be there? And so I'll let Rob pick up on that, but I can just tell you that the key to us is that truly high functioning leader has got to
Mhm.
have all three, right?
Yeah, because that truly is what's going to maintain the cadence of the work and I won't call it disruption specifically, but when a leader moves on, moves out, as you were saying, there's going to be some disruption. So if the team doesn't have a cadence and a process to continue working through, that's where you're seeing a lot of that disruption.
Yeah, you're right. Because,
Yeah.
it was everyone talks about change management. And I find this fascinating in that we talk about change management organizationally, but I don't know that we've equipped leaders to understand what's my leader's role in change management. And if I don't have systems, right,
Yeah. Yeah.
then we're vulnerable.
Mm, I love it. I love it. Rob, what's been your take then on this and your experience that you're seeing out there?
Yeah, I mean, I come at it from a little bit of a different take, not having the decades that Shane does, with CSI. And I think just contextually, we've got a real crisis right now in leadership. Gallup, does their global employee engagement survey, and they found 21% of employees are engaged, and which is just a staggering number.
So that's
And
actually dropped because it used to be like the
it
30%,
yeah,
right?
it dropped in 2025, and it's dropped the last couple years, and even worse, under 30% of managers are engaged. So the people who are leading people are also disengaged. And
Much.
and so
Yeah.
that crisis is massive. And you can peel apart exactly why that is. It's we have a hugely disruptive geopolitical and economic environment, right? Where things are changing really, really rapidly, whether that's tariffs coming in or AI or new markets or globalization, whatever it is, companies are trying to react to that. We also have, companies that, we're seeing now really significant layoffs, and employees wondering, all right, is the axe coming for me next, right? Am I, so that employee loyalty sense is down. And I think there's a real disconnect. And one of the real beacons that Shane has helped me see is this sense of employees able to answer the question, are we winning or losing?
Hmm.
At the factory line level, or at the customer sales rep level, if you work in insurance or financial services, or are we winning or losing? And the answer, most people, I don't think, can answer that question. And
Yeah.
because they don't understand how their work connects to this big strategy that the CEO or the senior leadership team has put forth, that's what I think in large part drives that disconnection. People want to feel connected to a team. They like being part of a winning team, but they also want to understand that their work is part of that, that contribution. And that's where systems, I think, help connect those dots for people.
Yeah. Yeah. So I absolutely love the question of are we winning or are we losing? Because I can honestly tell you, I think back to my career, I had never had a leader, manager, boss, whatever you want to, someone who was in authority leading a team ever sit down and say, are we winning or losing?
Yeah,
It's often just looked at
Yeah.
the end of a quarter, the end of the year. It's nothing that's happening on a regular basis. And I assume where you're going with this is more of a regular basis type of system and cadence, so people know every day whether they're winning or losing. Is that right, Shane?
yeah, you're right on, Mike, because go back to my IQ EQ, right? So often, because we haven't asked or answered that question,
Yeah.
it's left to the interpretation of, well, if my leader's in a good mood, we must be doing okay.
Right.
Or
Right.
if my leader is hands off and leaving us alone, we must be doing okay. Right. And so often, what Rob and I and the CSI team sees when we go into organizations is, even though there's walls plastered with KPIs and metrics and all these visualization tools of data, when
Mhm.
you get right at, are we winning or losing at that very tactical, practical level, people can't answer it because their answers still come back to the personality by which they're being led, right? And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
what we're trying to do is get people to understand this idea of PQ is, how do you build systems that inform this idea of winning and losing from a standpoint that is repeatable and consistent and drives clarity, so that those answers aren't anecdotal based on someone's mood for the day, but they're rather empirical based on the
Yeah.
system we built.
Right, right, or the interpretation, "Hey, the boss is leaving me alone, I must be doing great," when that could be the complete opposite because that person does not want to engage or have that difficult conversation, about performance. So I love this from a theoretical level of saying, yes, we need this in order for companies, teams to scale beyond where they are now. We need to have this connectivity, these process, these resources in place. Can you just unpack what does that look like? What is something that you share in this PQ process that might make it a little more tangible for the listeners?
Yeah, I'll start and then Rob
Yeah,
can hop in. I mean,
that'd be great.
let's take just a really easy example, right? Around communication within an organization. We did a study 2 years ago that talked about the number and time that leaders spend in meetings. and Mike, frankly, it was horrifying, right? That leaders are spending, 80, some even 90% of their week is spent in meetings, right? You don't have to look very far to see that often that's driven by, again, the personality styles that I want to pull people together. I have the need to have this meeting. It's, and we just lay on meeting after meeting after meeting. PQ says, no, we're gonna deconstruct that current way of work, and we're gonna reconstruct it from a system standpoint. For instance, right? Let's build this cascade that connects people on one non-negotiable communication cadence. Let's build some minimum non-negotiable content components. So not only are we aligning around a cadence of meetings, but we're also aligning around a content of conversation. And guess what that
Mm,
content needs to be? It needs to be around the metrics, right? Did we win the day or lose the day? Did we win the week or lose the week? So now you're starting to deconstruct an IQ, EQ, personality driven platform and reconstruct it through the lens of PQ that says, look, let's make sure that the time we spend in this meeting is actually moving the business forward, right? Aligning back to those good systems. And frankly, at the end of the day, when you begin to do that, here's the benefit. You begin to give people time back. And look, I'll just say very quickly, there is no greater change accelerant than to give people time back, right? It is like
yeah,
kerosene on a fire, right? That you just pour
yeah.
on there. And now people are going to be willing to extend more grace,
Mm,
right? To try something else because now you're giving them their time back.
right.
Rob mentioned a second ago about just the lack of engagement. And I think one of the things we're seeing is leaders are tired, right? There is such leadership fatigue today. And again, I'll go back to because it's IQ, EQ driven, it's personality driven, and it requires leaders to put the red cape on, swoop in, save the day. And that's not going to build the leader of the future.
Right. Right. Rob, what are you seeing from your side then? I mean, again, you're getting into the seat, you've been on the road, you've been participating in these programs. What are you seeing? And I'm curious, like, what's been from your client's perspective? Are you seeing the ahas as they're going through this, going, "Oh my gosh, yeah, this makes total sense now." What are you
Yeah,
seeing?
yeah, no doubt about it. I think, rightly so. I think a lot of people in corporate America are leery of consultants, right? I mean, and I understand that. I've certainly been there on, in their seat as well. We had one client who was on a video, with us who said, I really don't tend to trust consultants, and I didn't really trust, you guys when you came in, and I said, noted.
Yeah.
And He said, but just in our plant, our manufacturing facility, we've gone from A to B in a number of really important metrics: quality, consistency, on-time delivery, efficiency. And he was likening a $20 million savings just in his plant, over the course of a year.
Over a course of a year, the idea of integrating PQ, this leader was estimating could roughly around $20 million in savings.
Yeah. Now, in fairness, Mike, this is a client that works with
You
a
guys work
number
on
of
like
our different.
percentage? Do you work like
we,
percentage deals?
we don't, but maybe we should. Now, this is a client that not only has implemented our methodology around process, but also is working with our software that supports our methodology and
Mhm,
some of our
mhm.
leadership development training. And it was really the integration of those things that drove this huge increase. But that was, you went back to the things that I was interested in about CSI is not only these longstanding relationships, but the business impact. And the business impact is measured in dollars, no doubt about it. It's dollars of savings of efficiency, safety, productivity, and employee engagement, as a cultural element. But that culture drives new behaviors.
Right. Right. And new behaviors rarely come from one magic bullet, which is why, and it would be great to explain a little bit more about the way you surround PQ. You mentioned the consulting, you mentioned the software, you mentioned some of the leadership development. So you don't approach this from one perspective. This is really more of a holistic, integrated approach.
That's right. We try to
Yeah.
meet clients where they are,
Yeah.
and I think that sense of partnership is really what produces these long-standing relationships. And so sometimes that's purely system change, process change, really very consulting centric. Sometimes it's supported with software, and often it's supported with leadership development, and but with a very, very concrete eye towards bottom line changes, bottom
Without a
line
doubt.
results. This
Without a
is
doubt.
not pie in the sky. This is connecting strategy to execution. We're helping companies kind of build that connectivity muscle.
Right. And that would, you can get leaders at the C-suites buy into that because they recognize the value. Okay, we'll give it a shot. We'll keep going. I'm curious also though, because Shane, you mentioned something early on in the conversation about being up at 5 a.m. working with some frontline folks, sewing and things like that, right? Um, there's a different mentality in terms of mentality, and I think also appetite for change at different levels within an organization based on what's going to impact, right? And I think for some folks, when you get more to the front line, they're a little more jaded about change. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, it's here's the flavor of the week. Okay, just go along with this because in 3 weeks they're going to forget about it and move on. So,
Mhm.
how are you seeing, or what are you seeing in terms of that front line, maybe second mid tier level team member who maybe at first was like, okay, is this the flavor of the week? But now are maybe seeing the benefit of this themselves, and what is that benefit for them? Because I have another thought in there because you had mentioned the leaders. Rob, you talk about leaders being disengaged. I can't imagine that that goes back up the line too when the workers realize that their leaders don't care. Right. So anyway, Shay, I packed a lot into that. I'm sorry. This has got my head spinning in such a great way. But maybe just share like how are people? What reaction are you getting from the folks now buying in to this idea at that
No,
frontline level?
Mike, you're onto something. And I would say what you hit is another manifestation of IQ, EQ alone, right? Because look, I meet a lot of leaders who are the idea fairies, right? I got this great idea. I'm going to be here for this period of time. I'm going to lead this idea while I'm in this role, and they lead it through the power of their personality, right? And so it's all good as long as Mike's leading that great idea. But when Mike takes another role, the person that steps into Mike's role may not like that idea, may not understand that idea, maybe not even agree with that idea.
Hmm.
And the way that shows up for those workers, like I was with this week, was it feels to them like we get whiplash all the time. Every time a leader leaves, we get whiplash. It's not that they don't want to trust the leaders, right? I think they give leaders and organizations a lot of grace often, but what that shows to them is every time the leader changes, so does their direction, or so does what's important. And that's why with PQ, we're really trying to say, your people are willing to help you, right? In fact, they want to help you. They just need to see consistency, right? I mean, we all want to show up. I firmly believe, no matter what level you're at, if I'm the CEO or if I'm an artisan on the floor, I want to come to work and know that the way of work is not going to change based on who's there that day, right? And I can have confidence and certitude that our way of work is going to be consistent. And when people see that, then I believe they're going to be that much more engaged because they're not getting that whiplash of, well, it was this way today and tomorrow it's going to be a different way.
Right.
And then lastly, I would just one other thread to pull there. If people will engage if they feel like they're being heard, right? This team I was with this week, there was a frontline leader. Her name was Jess, right? She's over this sewing room. And one of the issues she had, and we were doing this tour, I had the director of engineering with me. And one of the issues she had was directly related to what was happening with the engineer aligned to her group, right? And having that director of engineer with me at 5 a.m. in that room where he literally pulled out our action register process and said, Jess, I hear you. Let me capture this. And by 10 o'clock that morning, he had dealt with that issue. I
Yeah.
can tell you that that feedback loop of number one, being present. Number two, using a process to do active listening. Number three, having Jess, the frontline leader, see that her sharing that resulted in action. And then lastly, by 10 a.m., having a resolution, those kind of things, again, it's the spark, right? And when people see that, you get the kind of high functioning organizations that we believe IQ, EQ, and PQ can really build.
Yeah.
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 I would just add one thing to that, Mike,
Please,
which is that
please.
I think that communication upward in addition to downward is a critical element of what we're talking about.
Okay.
Um, and I think Shane is right in terms of people want to be heard. They want to understand where they fit, and they want to understand. It does help eliminate this flavor of the month or week in that when we do work with tier one or shop floor kinds of folks, we really try to make sure that they understand that this process is being done with them, not to them or for them.
I like that. And that's a powerful distinction, isn't it? So, as you're thinking about where this can be applied, are there certain industries that this is better suited for, or is it something that could be? Is it really industry agnostic?
Rob, you want to take that?
I think it's fairly agnostic. I do think it works in organizations where there is a tiered model in terms of the way they're organized. So really flat organizations, high tech maybe might not work quite as well. But anywhere where there's a tiered model and where there's a daily close or weekly close, right? So that could be elements of financial services. Probably works maybe a little bit better than in insurance than it does in investment banking.
Okay.
Where you do have frontline folks who's responsible for selling and servicing customers, and that they're part of, they report up to a manager who reports to a manager. Where because you see that breakdown of communication happen across those tiers.
Hmm. Hmm. You're exactly right. So
Manufacturing, certainly, government, areas where we do have that tiered system.
great. Perfect. Perfect. So a wide range there for sure, but you can target based on the structure of the organization, see where this will best overlay to support. Now, this is in a book now too, isn't it? It's not just in there you go. Hold that up again. Hold that up again, please. Come on now. This from the guy who has, it's all about branding and
Yeah,
placement, right?
exactly. There you
So
go.
so where can people get the secret superpower? Where can we get that book? Where can we learn more about what you're doing in this most important work?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of ways, obviously. I mean, you could go to our website. You could also buy it on Amazon, right? And we were delighted to say that we were number one in our category when we launched. And so, we were getting some great
Fantastic.
traction with the book. And we, we believe it
And
really,
Barnes and Noble, we're not
yeah,
we're not
yeah,
specific to any particular book retailer. So
Okay.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Awesome. So your website, anywhere books can be purchased and found. I think that's
Mhm.
awesome. And obviously if there are leaders that are saying, I want to at least get this idea, a line of thinking in my organization, they can buy maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 of these in a batch perhaps,
Absolutely.
and they can
Yeah,
connect through your website on that.
they absolutely can, Mike.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, look, this has been a fantastic conversation. Like I said, this is a little different than where we typically go on the one-on-ones of a journey. Yet, as we think about the journey of leadership, and more importantly, as leaders, this is what I loved about this is not just from how you're empowering leaders, but also where we started the conversation and where leadership can evolve to and our role within the organization. Some of the takeaways here that I've been writing down, which I think will be important. I'm sure some of the listeners have jotted some of these down as well. However, you think about the idea of a leader, look in the mirror and ask those sometimes difficult questions about your role, about where is that second summit. What's my role in that second summit and the legacy that I've built? I think it's so powerful. I think it's even powerful for leaders to ask every day, not just when they're in a situation where they may exit an organization, but from your own leadership perspective and your team. I think that's phenomenal. The idea of understanding what you don't know first and foremost. If you're stepping into a leadership role in a new organization or with a team, understand that you don't have all the answers. Respect the team and where they've come from and what they've built by spending time to get to know them, build the relationships. Don't just change for change's sake. I love, Rob, your point about don't just shake the snow globe. That is gold. I'm going to use that moving forward. This idea of PQ breaking that process of leadership by personality or persuasion or brute force. The fact that leaders, we can often become the bottleneck of progress and sustainability and scalability if we don't have the right systems in place. And we've got to be mindful of that. The powerful question of are we winning or are we losing? Wow. I mean, it's just the idea of asking your team that. And if they can't answer it, or you yourself say, I don't know how I would answer it, then I believe PQ, this is something you need to be investigating and checking out, right? The idea of when there is change, be mindful of whiplash. The whiplash of the change that they're experiencing, maybe not from your perspective, but putting yourself in their shoes by being more present, practicing active listening. And more importantly, when you do listen, the resolution, they've been heard, and bring back information. Don't let it sit in the black hole. I mean, these are all just like amazingly, like just gold nuggets of not just leadership development, but how leaders can structure a team, an organization to not only increase their performance and their efficiency, but more importantly, bring people into an organization where they feel they're part of something that's lasting, that their contributions are recognized. And Rob, that gets back to your Gallup polls. Like, what if we in our own organizations could raise those percentages through a process like PQ? Mm. Gentlemen, this has been a great conversation. Is there anything that you would want to add that we didn't cover, or anything that you want to discuss or share about the company programs, offerings? Please, we'd love to support and hear more about it.
No, absolutely, Mike. Thank you for having Rob and I on. Our whole approach for 35 years is to optimize people, processes, and performance. And, our greatest compliment is when our customers tell the story of how we've helped them. And Rob alluded to that. And so anyone on your audience that's interested in how we get the results we do, we're going to point you right to our customers because they tell that story the best. So
I love it.
thank you for having me, Rob, and Mike, and certainly looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks
Absolutely.
so much.
Yeah, Rob, thank you so much. And for those of you listening in, again, thank you for joining us. I hope you're taking away some great ideas, frameworks, tools that you can use in your own pursuit. And until we join each other again here, just remember, as always, your best is yet to come. Cheers.